Hello and welcome to this Path of Exile beginner guide. This will be the very first video in an upcoming 4-part series where I'll do my best to cover this amazing game and help out new players better understand the game, the systems it has in place, endgame content, monetization model, and if I do a good job, it will help you better understand the game if you already started, or if you've never played Path of Exile. Hopefully after these videos you can decide for yourself if this is something you'd want to get into or not. Now, I know that at first glance this seems like an awesome, though overwhelming game, but believe me, it's so worth taking a few minutes and learning a bit about it before starting. Hello there, what is up? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a fantastic day. If this is your first time here, then welcome. My name is Tibby from Vectorburn. And as you might have seen in the title, today we are going to be covering Path of Exile. Now, since Path of Exile is an awesome game, but also kind of daunting, kind of overwhelming, it has a lot of cool systems and features in place, but it would be ludicrous to even try to include all that information just crammed into one video. Nobody is going to watch like a 2-hour video about Path of Exile, so this is the reason why the beginner guide will consist of 4 different videos. Each video will cover 6 distinct topics, and I will leave these topics either in the first pinned comment or in the description section below. That way, if you are not particularly interested in these 6 topics, but you want to find out about some other systems, then you can just check down in the description box and find the video that you were looking for. Now, again, the next 3 videos are going to be coming out in the very near future, so stay tuned for that, but just know that that will be the place to look for them. Before jumping into the video, if you like this video, if you find it useful in any way, shape or form, please consider subscribing. It means the world to me. It really helps me out, and that is showing your awesome support for what I do, and it keeps me going. So thank you so much. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, here we go. So as I said, in this video I will be covering 6 topics. These 6 topics are type of game, leagues, classes and build diversity, skill tree, which is the most daunting system in the game for the vast majority of new players, then spells, gems and gem levels, and finally a solid endgame system with everything included. Okay, so starting off with the type of game. So Path of Exile is an online action RPG set in a really dark fantasy world. The world is called Rayclast. Now, 2 games come to mind as far as comparison goes. I think it's a mix between Grim Dawn and Diablo 2. In case you are familiar with the hack and slash genre, then this just comes naturally to you, and in my opinion now, albeit a bit subjective, but in my opinion, Path of Exile is the best online hack and slash game that there is. Basically, I think Path of Exile is what Diablo 3 wanted to be, but never got there, and a whole lot more. So in case you are looking for a dark, grim online hack and slash game, then this will definitely quench your thirst. Like it's one of the best games out there. Alright, now moving on to the second topic on the list, which are leagues. So leagues are basically similar, just a bit similar to what Diablo 3 has, but they call it seasons. Now, I personally think that the way Path of Exile handles these leagues is way better than Diablo 3 ever could. Now, these leagues typically run for 3 months. Everybody gets a fresh start. Everybody should partake in the league mechanics. But if you don't, then you still don't get penalized, which is absolutely amazing. Nobody is forcing you to interact with the league mechanic, because each league mechanic will be different. Right now we have the Blight League, which is basically a tower defense kind of mechanic. I personally like it, but there are other people that don't, which is absolutely fine. And this is again like a strong suit of the game, that if you do not like the current league mechanic, then you do not have to interact with it, because the game has so many more options to offer you. There are a plethora of things that you can do, and your character and your power level will progress just as well. even if you don't partake in the current league mechanics. Now, I think that GGG, Grinding Gear Games, which is the developer for the game, introduced these leagues simply to test out the water and see what they can get away with. They would introduce something new, something quirky, and since it's just a league, it will last for 3 months. And then after they see the community response to it and they gather better data, see if people like it or not, then they can decide if the current league mechanic gets implemented into the base game, or they just scratch it and move on to the next league. Now, in my opinion, it is an absolutely genius way of adding new things to the game, testing them, without forcing the entire community to fully commit to these systems. Let's take, for example, World of Warcraft. Each time a new expansion comes out, you are forced to play in that expansion with those systems, whether you like it or not. And the downfall there is that if you do not like to partake in certain events, let's say like mythic dungeons or raiding or whatnot, then basically your character is gimped because you cannot progress your character as well as other people can that are actually partaking in that mechanic. This is the exact reason leagues are so good, because if you do not like the current league's mechanic, there are still so many other things you can do, and you can just completely ignore the current league. Additionally, as I mentioned, all leagues will last for about 3 months, after which your character, whatever you played, gets transferred to the standard league. More on this a bit later, and then a new league starts, fresh start for everybody. And if you're a completely new player, or even if you're not, I would highly advise you to only play in leagues. There is a standard league, but the standard league is as old as the game is, which means that the few people that still play standard are incredibly rich. Like, they just stocked up on all kind of items, like legacy items that cannot be found in the game anymore. They have gathered a lot of currency, and it's much harder to purchase something, to buy something. But with these temporary leagues, everybody starts from scratch, and you have a good competitive chance against other players. Okay, so now that we talked about these temporary leagues, each time you start a new league, you will need to create a new character. And this is a perfect segue into our next topic, which are classes and build diversity. Now, currently there are 7 classes you could pick from. Well, actually 6 plus the Scion, but let's be real, nobody cares about the Scion. These 7 classes consist of the Ranger, the Shadow, the Witch, the Templar, the Marauder, the Duelist, and finally the Scion, which is basically a mix of all of the other characters. Now, the really cool thing about Path of Exile is that no character, no class, no matter what you choose, is not going to be locked in with a class-specific skill. I mean, hell, there is no class-specific skill for any of them. Basically, what defines a class is the specialization or the subclass of each of these 6. Well, actually 7, but again, let's not talk about the Scion. So if you go for a Ranger, for example, that you can either be a Deadeye, a Raider, or a Pathfinder. So each class will have 3 specializations, which in this game are called ascendancies. So once you ascend, you will pick your specialization, and that is where the build-defining character comes into play. Now, as I said, a really cool feature that I myself am absolutely crazy about is that no matter what character you pick, you are not locked in to a one specific skill. Let's say you pick the Marauder, which is typically the warrior type of character. You won't have to only use warrior-like abilities, something like Cyclone, which is the equivalent of Whirlwind in Diablo. You can roll a Marauder, pick something like a Juggernaut as the ascendancy, but then still use, if you really want to, spells that are kind of mage-like. You can use stuff like Freezing Pulse or Firestorm or whatever you want. Lightning Arrow, which is typically a Ranger class specific skill. The possibilities of this game are absolutely endless. Now I think this is where the game complexity starts to roll in, and it's only going to ramp up from here, but please rest assured there are so many build guides up there that just tell you what to do step by step. In this video I just warn you to have a basic understanding of the game and not really the character or the build itself. I just want to emphasize that whatever you pick, you can basically use any skill you want. Now naturally each ascendancy will excel at one thing and be, you know, subpar or okay at other things. It really depends on where you start on the skill tree, but more on that later. Now, as I mentioned, all classes can have 3 ascendancies or 3 specializations outside of the Scion, which can have a mix of them all, but again, Scion, Black Sheep, whatever. Now, these ascendancies consist of the Duelist, which can be a Slayer, a Gladiator, or a Champion. Then we have the Shadow, which can be an Assassin, a Saboteur, or a Trickster. Then we have the Marauder, which can be a Juggernaut, a Berserker, or a Chieftain. Then we have the Witch, Necromancer, Occultist, and Elementalist. The Ranger can be a Deadeye, a Raider, or a Pathfinder. The Templar can be an Inquisitor, a Hierophant, or a Guardian. And then the Scion can just pick whatever she wants to. Ugh, whatever. Knowing these ascendancies, this is what your character will be referred to. So if you're on the forums and looking for a dank build, you probably won't see them defined as the base character, so like a Duelist or Shadow, but more like a Gladiator or a Trickster. These class specializations offer unique bonuses and really build defining characteristics that you just couldn't really achieve without picking the right ascendancy. Right, so I hope you are with me up until this point and everything kind of makes sense, right? So we have classes, but those classes have specializations, and no matter what you pick, you can still use whatever skill you want. But again, it's always advised to look for a specific build that is already proven to work until you get the hang of the game, and then later on you can just design your own quirky builds that really just destroy everything in the game. Alright, now let's move on to our next topic. So this monstrosity that you see on your screen right now, this is the skill tree, or as it's referred to in Path of Exile, the passive tree. Now, unlike other games where you level up, you get like 5 stat points of something and then you just allocate those, or when you level up you just automatically get skills and stuff allocated to you. In Path of Exile you get points which then you can manually allocate in this monstrosity of a skill tree. Do bear in mind that whenever you finish leveling your character and let's say your max level, you will still only have completed about 10 or 15% of this entire tree. You are not meant to complete everything because you just can't, but just taking a look at this skill tree, you can just imagine the level of customization each character and each build can receive. Now again, this seems very daunting at first glance, and as I mentioned before, there are build guides that explain step by step each level where to allocate your points to. That way you can't mess it up, you just follow along, you just keep clicking whatever you need to click, and you will end up with a very good character, very solid endgame bosser and whatever. So it's completely doable, and after you have a solid understanding of the game, then you can go in and start creating your own builds. Just figure out ways to customize your character, pick a skill, and then build the entire skill tree around that skill, just scaling damage, scaling survivability, whatever you want to do. It's really up to you. And the good part is that, I mean, this is proven, like this is a fact, I'm not making this up, that whatever skill you choose in the game, it doesn't matter what skill it is or how silly it is, it has been proven that whatever you pick, you can kill all endgame bosses with it. It doesn't matter what you pick, you will be able to get there with the necessary knowledge and the way to build your skill tree around that, but it's absolutely possible, which leaves this game to be even more desirable, at least for me, because the level of customization is absolutely endless. Right, so we have relished enough in the glory of this monstrosity. Now let's move on to spells, gems, and gem levels. So in Path of Exile, since any class can use any spell, or as they're referred to in this game, skills, they come in the form of skill gems. So this is how each character can use each skill. You simply pick up the specific skill gem you want to use, you socket it inside a piece of armor. Now the items themselves will be covered in a future video, but just know that you take up a skill gem, you place it inside a piece of gear, and you will be ready to use it. Now naturally, some skill gems will require a specific type of weapon, like you can't use something like lightning arrow with a mace, because that just doesn't make sense. Luckily, each skill gem will come with a description, as in what it does, what kind of damage it does, and what kind of weapon you need to have equipped in order to be able to use it. Now skill gems will come in 3 colors, well actually 4, but let's not go into too much detail. They come in 3 colors, which is red, green, and blue. Each armor type will have to have a specific color of socket in order for you to be able to place your skill gem inside and start using it. Now the skill gem themselves will have 2 types. You have active skill gems, which you will use to actually kill mobs, so something like Fireball for example. And then you have support gems, which will support and modify your primary skill. So let's say you are using Fireball, and then you attach to it something like lesser multiple projectiles, which will alter the way your Fireball works. So now instead of shooting out 1 projectile, you will shoot out 3, and there's also another gem that makes it 5. Now most skill gems will start at level 1, and the second you equip it, as in you socket it inside a piece of gear, and you start going out and killing stuff, the gem will level alongside your character. So the more you kill, the more experience you get, and the more experience the skill gem gets. The maximum level of each skill gem through natural progression is level 20. So once you reach level 20 on your skill gem, it will stop leveling. Additionally, there is a type of currency called GCP. That's what they refer to it, but GCP stands for Gem Cutter's Prism. You use one of these to increase the quality of a specific gem. If we take our Fireball, for example, 1 GCP added to it will give it a 1% quality. Now, for Fireball specifically, we'll get a 0.5 chance to ignite enemies. So if a skill gem can reach a maximum level of 20% quality, and you get a 0.5% chance per 1 quality, that means you will have 10% additional chance to ignite enemies. Now a more complex system, and I don't really want to get into it because this is not the video to really overwhelm you, but there are Vol gems which you can corrupt a fully leveled gem, which does have the possibility of leveling up the gem even further. So instead of level 20 and 20 quality, you could get lucky and get something like level 21 and like 23 quality, which in endgame, 1 level is humongous and your DPS increase is just phenomenal. However, this was just an additional bit of information. As a new player, you won't really have to worry about this just yet. And for our last and final topic of this video, I want to touch a bit on the solid endgame system this game has to offer. I have played a bunch of hack and slash games, and in my honest opinion, I haven't found any other game that has such an abundance of endgame systems you can partake in. You're not really locked into anything. If you don't like one system, you can simply switch to another. Even in endgame, you have so much diversity, and it's not like if you don't do one, then your character progression is kind of gimped or something. Like, you have multiple avenues to really push your character's limits, and whatever floats your boat, that's the thing you're gonna do, and it will be enough. Now, in order to expand a bit on this idea of endgame systems, you first have to know that the maximum level in this game is level 100. However, you are not required in any way, shape or form to reach level 100. Reaching level 100 is no easy task, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, I have never in my 5.5 years reached level 100 simply because There was no need to. Most builds out there do not include a level 100 build, because nobody expects you to actually get to level 100. The skill tree, while it offers great rewards like each point matters, it will at the end have some diminishing returns, so it's really not that essential to get to level 100. At level 91, 92, maybe 93, you will be more than capable of destroying the entire content without getting those additional 7 levels to maximize your efficiency. A level 93 will be on par with a level 100. Like it's really more about the gear and not that much about the levels. So the beginning of the end game starts at about level 68 to 70. That is when you get into maps. Now I'm not going to go in depth about maps in this video, that will be in an upcoming video. Just know that maps are basically instances created by you. It will just generate a random layout of a certain map, of a certain ecosystem, and then you go inside, and depending on the level of the map or the tier of the map, that will determine the mob and the difficulty inside that map. So the higher the tier, the higher the monster level, the better the rewards. Now at level 68 to 70, that's when you start getting into maps, and those will be the tier 1 maps, and from there you slowly progress through your atlas. Your atlas is basically a collection of all the maps that you can do. There are 157 maps that you could complete, and you can run one specific map over and over again if you like the layout, if you like the theme of it, if you like the mob density. Like, it's really up to you what you want to do, if you want to do maps, and which map you want to do. Now, besides this, a previous league has introduced a new mechanic that is called delving. Now, the community feedback to this was absolutely fantastic, and the developers incorporated that in the base game mechanic. So nowadays, regardless of the current league and what the theme is, you will always find the possibility of delving. So delving is basically an endless dungeon. Like, there is absolutely no end to it. The theme of it is a mine, so you go inside a mine and you have some nodes. You keep going deeper and deeper into the mine, completing these small objectives, and there's no end to it. Now, the deeper you go, the more difficult the mobs become. They're gonna have a lot more health, they're gonna hit harder. Of course, delving is always better in a group, and we will be discussing group play in a future video. Now, if you don't like delving, you can switch to maps, or if you don't like maps, you can switch to delving. Whenever you complete the 4 most difficult maps in the game, each map boss will drop a fragment. You will need to collect 4 fragments in order to create a supreme map, where you will find one of the game's most difficult boss. At least he was the most difficult boss up until a certain point. It is referred to as the Elder, and a lot of people do this almost exclusively. They buy up the fragments, they spawn the Elder map, and they just farm this badass boss over and over again, because the rewards can be pretty good, especially at the beginning of the league. The items that exclusively the Elder drops are quite expensive, and some people just really love currency farming. And this is another solid endgame choice if you don't really feel like delving or completing maps over and over again. You just buy the fragments and basically boss hunt, which, again, for a hack and slash exclusively boss hunting, that's just freaking awesome. Like, there's no doubt about that. Now, since it's been a good 6 years since the game came out, we have a boss that is even more difficult to kill than Elder, which is his counterpart, I guess, the Uber Elder. So if you thought the Elder was difficult, just try to take a crack at the Uber Elder. Since Path of Exile gets regular updates, and I do mean regular, at least every 3 months, new bosses and new endgame bosses will be trickling in slowly. So if you watch this video sometime in the middle of 2020, then I'm pretty sure that Path of Exile 4.0 should be out, and there should be an even more difficult boss than the Uber Elder. But TLDR, a game that offers this many options for endgame activities is an absolute winner in my book, and I absolutely love it. Alright, and that about does it for the first episode of this 4-part miniseries. I hope you liked the video. I hope you got something useful out of it. If you did, please consider subscribing. Awesome way to show support, so thank you. And I guess I'll see everybody in the next video. Until then, have a great one. Bye bye.